Welcome to Fix It Home Improvement, covering projects that every homeowner should know and great products for home and garden.
Hi, I'm JC, and this is where we share weekly home improvement tips. I'm here with my co-host, Cindy.
Hello, JC.
Hi, Cindy. Today we're going to be talking about electric air compressors, and we'd like to thank Cindy Petrinoff for giving us a 5-star rating and review on our 4th home improvement book. And she mentioned, "Great job, Cindy," on the review.
Thank you, Mrs. Petrinoff.
We decided to drop the book price down to $1, so if you missed our free promotion, you can go to Amazon and pick up our 4th home improvement book called Home Improvement Solutions, What Every Homeowner Should Know, Book 4, for only $1.
Get all 4.
And we dropped them all to $1, so you can get 4 for $4.
Wow, such a deal.
It is. Fantastic reference. Mm-hmm. And if you like it, we would really appreciate a rating and review.
5-star rating and review.
In ancient Egypt, workers used leather bags you stepped on called pot bellows, and this would compress air. They'd force this into a furnace to increase the heat so they could work metal. In 1650, Otto von Guericke invented the first air pump, and he used this to create a partial vacuum. So one of his famous experiments in 1657, he took 2 copper bowls, put them together to form a sphere, and he used his air pump to remove the air. And 8 horses connected to each side of that sphere couldn't pull it apart. Wild, huh? Mm-hmm. In 1871, Ingersoll Rand developed some of the first air compressors for mining and construction, and they built the first air compressors for Mount Rushmore in 1927 and the first atomic submarine in 1954. And they still have some top-rated air compressors.
Exciting.
If you're thinking about purchasing an air compressor for projects around the house, an electric air compressor is going to be very versatile.
For what?
So you can use this for filling the tires in your car or truck, bikes, wheelbarrows. You can inflate pool toys if you have sports equipment. Makes it very easy to inflate it.
You're going to buy an air compressor to fill tires.
Yeah, because it's like $1 if you go down to the gas station. So think of the money savings. And then if you're doing projects around the house, you can use this for staplers or nailers for trim work or spray guns for paint. And in fact, that's where I first started using an air compressor. I worked for the spray paint company, and we used spray guns, and we would paint appliances and kitchen cabinets. So we would go to people's houses. We had this big, heavy compressor, and we'd have to take out, and then we'd go into the house. We'd build a spray booth and do all this painting. And it is amazing how the prices have come down, because when I first started investing in real estate, I actually had a lot of these skills, but I couldn't afford the compressors and all the air tools back then. And now it's very affordable to get one. One of the key things you need to know before you purchase an air compressor is what tool are you going to be using, or tools. What is the CFM and the PSI requirements? Do you ever plan on using 2 tools at once, or will you upgrade down the road to additional tools? And you want a compressor that's rated higher than your highest rated tools. And pros are recommending adding up all the CFMs of all the tools you'll be using at the same time if you're using more than one, and add 25 to 50% to that. Or one easy way is just multiply the highest CFM by 1.5.
Exciting.
Math. Your CFM, or sometimes you'll see SCFM, is the standard cubic feet per minute. And this is the airflow that your tool needs to work properly. So I went on a couple of the home center sites, and framing nailers, for example, need about 3 CFMs at 80 PSI. Some finish nailers, 2.4 CFMs at 90 PSI. I looked at a roofing nailer. It needed 3.9 CFM up to 120 PSI, depending on your project. There was another roofing nailer, 4.2 CFM at 90 PSI. And then if you're looking at something smaller like a pin nailer, it was 1.8 CFM at 70 PSI. So it's very important that you know your tool and you get a compressor that's going to match it. The PSI is pounds per square inch, and the standard is 90 PSI. And most tools for homeowners are going to run at 90 PSI. You're going to have some at 40 to 70. And then if you get into larger tools like sanders, they may need 100 to 120 PSI, or if you're getting tools for automotive work, and these are more professional tools.
Okay.
And if you do just plan on using an air compressor in your garage for automotive, you might want to consider a 240 volt unit. It's going to be more powerful, more airflow. But for projects throughout your house, you want a 120 volt compressor, 15 amps or less, and you don't want to use an extension cord if possible. Use longer air hoses to get to your project, and if you do have to use an extension cord, make sure you get one that's grounded and it exceeds the amp rating of your unit, and underrated cord will shorten the life of the motor. When you're comparing units, you want to think about the weight if you plan on moving your compressor around the house for projects. And it's not just the weight, but the design of the unit so it's easy to lift and carry, especially if you're going up or down stairs or moving it in and out of a car. So a wheelbarrow style or a very wide unit may be difficult or even dangerous. Although if you have a ranch style house, you might prefer something with wheels. And then think about the storage. Where are you going to put this? Is it in the garage alongside a car or in a walkway? Because there's a lot of different shapes.
Okay.
A pancake compressor has a wide, flat tank, generally without wheels. It's very stable, but it can be difficult to move depending on where they put the handle. Hot dog compressors are generally long, cylindrical tanks with wheels and a handle. A twin stack style has a variety of shapes. You have two tanks that are stacked on top of each other, and some are very thin and easy to carry upstairs. And then a wheelbarrow style has two tanks with a single wheel in between the tanks and then handles on the end of it. But there's quite a few styles and configurations.
Are any more named after food?
So, some of the hot dog styles have very small tanks and no wheels with a handle on top, so they're easy to carry. Some have double handles that wrap around the front to protect the gauges and knobs, so that's another thing to look at. And then I would take a look at a couple of home centers to get a feel for the dimensions and the portability, maybe lift a couple, and then storage. And if you have limited space, one may be better than another. And if you do plan on setting it up in a garage or workshop, they have stationary vertical tanks and they don't take up a lot of floor space. Along with portability and storage, the tank size relates to how much air your tool can use before the motor turns back on to recharge the tank. So if you only plan on ever working with tools that use small bursts of air like a nailer or stapler, you can go with a smaller tank or a single tank, 1 to 3 gallons. If you're using multiple tools or tools that need continuous streams of air like drills or grinders or a large spray gun, you'd want a larger tank or multiple tanks, 6 to 15 gallons. So a unit with a high PSI but a small tank is going to be running more. And then a unit with a low PSI but a large tank, it's going to take a very long time for it to recharge, so you're going to be waiting. And you want enough air that your motor doesn't have to run continuously because this is going to add to the wear and tear of your unit. And this relates to the duty cycle. So this is the recommended time the motor should run per hour. So if you see a 50-50 duty cycle, they're recommending that it's only running 30 minutes per hour. If you have a 75-25, it can run up to 45 minutes every hour.
Okay.
The horsepower of your compressor is going to relate to the CFM and PSI, and that's really what you want to focus on. What's the CFM that your tool needs? But if you can get the best CFM for the lowest horsepower, you're usually going to get a quieter unit, and the sound is going to be measured in decibels, so you're going to see a small d and a capital B. And decibels is one of the features, especially if you're working inside your house, that you want to pay attention to.
Right.
Anything 85 decibels or louder can actually cause permanent hearing damage over time, and so you're going to have to be wearing hearing protection. Units around 70 decibels are going to be very quiet in comparison. Air compressor motors come single stage or two stage. A single stage draws air in and compresses it once into the tank, and it could have one or more pistons, usually one. Two-stage compresses the air twice, and it usually has two pistons. So it's not really the number of cylinders, it's how many times the air is compressed. So two-stage units are usually heavier duty with more air volume and pressure for bigger tools, or if you're using multiple tools. Most homeowner models are going to be single-stage. And you could also have a belt drive compressor, but most homeowner models are going to have a direct drive rather than a belt drive. Compressors can also be oil lubricated or oil free.
What do you mean oil free?
So it's pretty cool. They use Teflon or some other lubricants and they seal it so you never have to maintain that oil or you never have to maintain the lubrication, which is pretty cool.
Is there or is there not oil?
There could be, but it's sealed, which is pretty cool. So the Teflon type, it slowly wears off over time, and they're not really designed, like a pro would never use one. They would want the oil lubricated. They're generally a little more expensive and heavier, and you've got a lot more maintenance because you've got to check the oil before every use. You've got to change the oil. But for a homeowner, if you're not going to be using it all the time, if you're just using it for the occasional project,
Filling your tires?
It's just a lot less maintenance. You also want to compare the drain valves on the tanks. The easiest to use and the longest lasting.
There's multiple valves?
Oh, there's a lot of different types. Some are really difficult to use. I like the quarter turn valves.
No, I mean like on the tank.
What do you mean?
You said compare the valves.
Right. When you're shopping, you want to compare the drain valve on the different models because a quarter turn valve is going to be the easiest to use. You're draining the condensation. So when you're compressing this air, you're creating moisture inside the tank. And after every day's use, you want to open up this valve and drain all the condensation out to prevent corrosion or to slow down corrosion.
Do people know this?
Yes.
I didn't.
If you plan on using two tools at once, look for units with two quick connections for your hoses.
Using two tools at once?
So if you're working on projects and you've got two people working at once, you can both use the compressor.
So it's not like you have like a nailer in one hand and a spray gun in the other?
Yeah, cool. So the standard sizes for air hoses are 1/4 inch and 3/8. The most common for homeowners is going to be 1/4 inch hose and tool connections. And your compressor will have two gauges, one for the tank pressure and one for the air pressure available for your tool. And you're going to have a regulator knob to adjust the pressure to your tool. Some models are going to have locking knobs to prevent vibration from changing the setting. Clockwise is increasing the pressure, and counterclockwise is reducing the pressure down to 0. And you're generally reducing this down to 0 before you connect and disconnect your hose. Your tank pressure might be 125 or 150 psi or more, and the motor is going to turn off when it reaches that pressure, and then it turns itself back on when it gets to a preset low pressure. The higher tank pressures are going to let you use your tools longer before the motor has to recharge the tank, generally easier on the motor. And then if you plan on moving the unit a lot, take a look at the protection it has for the quick connects and the knobs and the gauges. Some units are going to have a shroud, or they're going to have handles that are designed to protect them if it got knocked over or if something fell against it. Another thing to look for are compressor kits. So this comes with the compressor and tools or hoses, and a lot of them are a much better value than if you're going to buy all the parts separately.
Okay.
When you're using your compressor, it should be in a well-ventilated area to prevent overheating, and you want to keep it away from flammable vapors. The electrical contacts in the motor and the pressure switch can spark. And then air from the compressor isn't designed to be breathed in, so this can contain carbon monoxide, toxic vapors, or even particles, and that can damage your lungs.
When would you be breathing this in?
So, so you can put an air gun on this. You just don't want to be, blowing it on somebody or breathing it in, or if you're draining it, you just don't want to be breathing in the air from the tank. Before you use your compressor, read the manual for your model for the break-in steps, the maintenance, and troubleshooting, because before you use the compressor for the first time, most require a break-in procedure. So you're going to run the compressor with no load to seat the valves and seals properly, and make sure before you start it, if it's an oil lubricated, you're checking the oil level.
Right.
So the steps generally are, you're going to turn off the unit, you're going to open up the drain valve in the tank, you're going to plug it in and then turn the switch to on and just let it run for 20 to 30 minutes. Then you're going to turn it off, you're going to close the drain valve, and now you're ready to use it. So that's the break-in. Some units, they want you to run it for 20 minutes and then slowly close the drain valve to build up pressure in the tank. It's going to shut off automatically. Then they want you to slowly open the drain valve till it restarts, then turn it off, and then you're ready to use it. So make sure you check your manual.
Okay.
You want to drain your tank after every day of use to prevent condensation from corroding the tank.
After every day of use? Or
Right.
after every use?
Well, it'd probably be better if you did it after every use, but
That's what I would do.
but if you're on a project and you plan on keep using it, I would probably just keep the pressure up. So I would probably just drain it after every full day of use. Some pros keep the valve open till the next time they use it. Some recommend keeping it closed. I would check my manual. Check your air filter routinely. Some filters can be cleaned. Paper filters need to be replaced. And then check the safety valve routinely. So with the unit off and the tank empty, pull and release the ring a couple of times to make sure it opens and closes smoothly. And there's a lot of pressure on that when you pull it out. But if it's difficult or it sticks or you can't open it, you definitely have to replace it because that's your safety. And what I would do is I would go to a home center and pull open a couple of them just to get a feel for the pressure on one that's good.
Are these on display?
In most home centers, yes, they're going to be on display. So you can get a feel for, how the size, how to lift it, how awkward they are, and then how much pressure is on the safety valve.
Exciting.
And also the drain. Check out the drain valve. For oil lubricated compressors, check the dipstick and the oil level before each use. You don't want it too high or too low. And you're checking the oil with the compressor unplugged and on a level surface. Most are going to be using synthetic non-detergent air compressor oil, but check your manual. And you're replacing the oil in the air filter usually about every 200 hours. Again, check your manual.
200 hours?
Of use.
How are you supposed to keep track of that? A journal?
Journal. Yes.
So, is it a special oil that you're using?
Yes, it's a synthetic, usually...
It says air compressor oil?
Yes, most of them, that's how it's going to be marked. I believe almost all of them are a 30W, but some use a 20.
Is this going to be like by all the other oils, or...?
Probably not. This is probably going to be by the compressors in most home centers.
Okay.
Many pros don't recommend powering an electric air compressor with a generator. It can damage the motor because the starting watts can be 3 or 4 times the running watts. To start your compressor, you want the on-off lever in the off position before you plug it in, and you want to turn your regulator knob down to 0 psi, so you're turning the knob counterclockwise, and don't over-rotate that knob. You can actually damage it. Check the oil if you have an oil lubricated unit. Then you're going to plug it in and turn it on using the lever. If you're in a cold weather environment, less than 45 degrees Fahrenheit, take a look at your manual. Some recommend that you warm it up 3 to 5 minutes with the drain valve open. And then always turn it off with the lever. Never just pull the plug while the unit's running. You can damage it. The on-off switch is also a pressure switch in small homeowner units, so you don't want to bypass that. Turn your regulator down to 0 before removing your air hose. Drain your air tank and make sure it's unplugged.
Wow, it's complicated.
Some top-rated electric air compressors: Porter Cable, Makita, DeWalt, Bostitch, Bostich, Senco, it's Senco, California Air Tools, Campbell Hausfeld, so it's Campbell, Hausfeld, Ingersoll Rand, it's Ingersollrand, and Rigid. So I took a look at a couple of the home centers and the specs on some top-rated models under $200. The California Air, for example, is a hot dog style. It's 2.2 CFMs at 90 psi and 3.1 CFMs at 40 psi. It's oil-free, it has an 8-gallon tank, and it's only 60 decibels, so very quiet. Rigid has a pancake style. It's 2.6 CFM at 90 psi and 3.5 CFM at 40 psi. It's oil-free, it has a 6-gallon tank, but it's 80 decibels. So it's quite a difference just in those two on how loud they would be. And then in that same section, and really real close to the same price, you've got a Senco. It's a hot dog style. So this is like a mini hot dog with no wheels. It has a handle to carry it. It's 0.7 CFM at 90 psi. So this is really for like a small trim gun.
Okay.
And this is oil-free. It's 1 gallon and it's 68 decibels. And then you've got a Makita. It's a mini hot dog also at 0.4 CFM at 90 psi, 72 decibels. So it's very important that you're analyzing the CFMs because it has to match your tool.
This was really hard for me not to just yell out numbers while you were doing this.
Well, what's funny is most of the tools that were right there in that section, the finish nailers and the nailers, were 3 CFM at 80 psi or 3.3 CFM at 70 psi. They had a finish nailer at 2.4 CFM at 90 psi, but a lot of these aren't going to work with these compressors. And some of these look like, it's a big compressor, but you need to know the CFM and the PSI. So then I looked at some of the top rated between $200 and $300, and DeWalt, for example, had a twin stack. It's 4 CFM at 90 psi, 5 CFM at 40, and this was oil lubricated 4 gallon. A Makita had a twin stack, 4.2 at 90, 4.8 at 40. This was also oil lubricated, 4.2 gallon. And then the Senko, which had the very low one with the small one, they have a twin stack 4.9 at 90 psi, which is fantastic. Oil free, 4.5 gallons. So you really need to make sure that you're looking at the tool. That's why those kits, I think, are nice, because they're matching the tool that you're going to be using, especially if you're just going to be primarily for trim around your house.
Or filling your tires.
And then always filling the tires.
Do you have anything else to add?
The key is matching the CFMs to your largest tool, but in general with a compressor, you want the most CFMs with the highest PSI and duty cycle, with the lowest weight, lowest decibels, the easiest to move and store, with the best warranty.
That was a lot.
And download our book.
Let's wrap this up.
We want to thank everybody who gave us a rating and review for Book 4, and it's now on sale for $1 on Amazon. It's called Home Improvement Solutions, What Every Homeowner Should Know, Book 4. If you want to subscribe to the podcast, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, the Spotify mobile app, the Google Play Music app, iHeartRadio, and CastBox.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review.
You can check out our home improvement videos on our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement.
And you can subscribe to that as well.
You can follow us on Twitter at Fix It Podcast, or follow Cindy. She has fantastic pictures for the podcast at Fix It Co-host.
Thank you for listening.
Talk to you next week.